everybody, welcome back. So last week I talked about the JoCoAlbMo project, right? Trying to create a concept album in 1 month. And I talked a little bit about how that turned out, and my insiders already have access to that record, and I'm hoping to get the public release together here in a few weeks. So I'll keep you posted on that. So last week I talked a little bit about just how the overall record came together, the JoCoAlbMo rules and that kind of thing. And what I thought I'd talk about this week is maybe start to walk through the content of the record a little bit. As I mentioned last week, it is a concept album, and it's supposed to kind of move through, maybe not quite a story, but a sort of a series of emotions and different types of genres and different messages over the course of the record. So I thought I'd take a quick walk through the track list and talk a little bit about the content there, and then maybe in the weeks to come talk a little bit about some of the production that went into the different types of genres on the record, the different types of songs that got made. So here's the track list that we looked at last time, and how did it all come together? So the album is called An Ocean. As I mentioned last week, it runs about 1 hour and 6 minutes in length, and it's got 16 tracks on it. So the way the album is actually structured is there's kind of some movements and sections to the record in some way. So the first thing I thought I'd mention is that the first track and the last track, No Time and Emit On, are instrumentals that kind of bookend the record. They both feature some sound effects that I actually generated in Octave, the mathematical music, well, it's not a music program, it's a math program, but I used it for audio manipulation. So it kind of features that, and track 1 also includes some other samples of some somewhat humorous and also just kind of some noise and sound art kind of things, samples from different places. So these are meant to kind of bookend the record and sort of introduce and then kind of take you back out sort of the way you went in a way. The next big structural aspect of the record is actually an a cappella piece called Failure. Failure is written in 4 parts, 4 movements, so to speak. The number of voice parts actually varies from track to track. It starts out with 2 and then works its way up to 5. But Failure Part 1 is track 2, track 6, track 9, and track 14 are parts 2, 3, and 4 respectively. So it has kind of this pacing throughout the record of revisiting this particular idea of what failure is and in a way what it's for, or, kind of in a way. But we could talk more about that in some future videos. But so these a cappella pieces kind of serve as landmarks or milestones on the record. You know, as I think I mentioned before, the concept of the record has a lot to do with my own musical journey, coming from the End of the North project back in 2008 up to the present. And the 4 parts of Failure kind of serve as landmarks along the way of different stages in a way, or realizations that I came to over the years in between. So then what happens now is that the other songs of the record kind of shuffle in between those milestones, and they kind of create sections of the record where I'm talking about different aspects of that experience. So there are some songs on the record that I think are pretty accessible in the sense that they're I don't want to call them pop exactly, but you know, they're kind of folk-like or rock-like. They're things that I might have written with North. I mean, they sound kind of like music that I could have written with North. And they're, you know, kind of what I think most people would think of as music. You know, they have familiar rhythms and chord progressions, and you know, lyrics and fairly straightforward musical ideas. So those tracks are Greatness is actually one of the pre-written songs on the record. And actually, if the album has a single, it's that. It's a song that has a lot of attitude and kind of a little bit of humor to it. But it's definitely a pretty accessible kind of tune. And I'm playing around with the idea of trying to put a video together actually for it. But we'll see how that comes together. That might be a project in the coming months. We'll see. Change the World is a very folk-like tune. It's just acoustic guitar and vocals, very kind of stripped down, but definitely pretty accessible, pretty laid-back tune. Gut Punch is another song that has a lot of attitude. It's a song that really is very humorous. It's almost deliberately silly, I guess, in some ways, but also actually conveys kind of an interesting message as well. So that's a pretty accessible tune. The other tunes that I think are probably pretty normal, My Piece of Sky, track 13, and What Now Is Left. This one is kind of a nice, it's a song in 6, so it's got kind of a, you know, sway to it, and it's pretty, I think pretty accessible. And then What Now Is Left, even though it's just guitar and vocals, it's one of those songs I wanted to add more to that I wish I could have, but it's kind of meant to be like the real closing song of the record. Obviously the instrumental that kind of takes you out follows it, but it's really sort of the culmination of the record kind of coming together at the end. So I think it's pretty upbeat and a pretty, it's actually one of the songs on the record that I think I enjoy listening to the most in sort of a pop rock kind of, you know, normal music kind of sense. Then you have some other interesting little aspects and tidbits. My Piece of Sky, which I mentioned, track 13, actually has a counterpart here in track 7, an album called My Piece, the other kind of piece of Sky. These two actually function as a pair. They actually have the same chord progression, some of the same themes to them musically. The lyrics, in a way, for parts of them, even I won't say mirror each other, but they, you know, the line structure is similar, and even some words are used in common. They're meant to be a pair because they talk about flip sides of the same coin. When we get into the, you know, song by song breakdowns, maybe in the week to come, I'll talk a little bit more about how those came together. But the first one, I think, is much less accessible. It's a song that's fully electric. It's a lot noisier. It's got some weird kind of stuff going on. As you can see, track 13 is only 4.5 minutes long, whereas track 7 is the longest song on the record, clocking in at 7 minutes. And it's got all kinds of noise in it. It's a much more aggressive, you know, it still has rhythm and chords and things. I think most people would consider it normal music, but I think it's just a little bit noisier. It's probably something that's a little bit less accessible to some people. So what's left is kind of the real sort of outliers on the record in terms of genre. And Ocean is an entirely mathematically constructed piece, not from raw numbers. It uses samples. It actually starts out with a sample of one of my Insiders releases, a song that I recorded, I think it was an Insiders freebie actually, a song that I recorded years ago called Something to Say. But after a very short period of time, I think it's about 10 seconds, another song comes in, and then another song comes in, and then another song comes in, and all these samples are treated and enveloped in kind of interesting ways mathematically. I'll probably talk about that piece maybe in more depth down the road if I think anybody might be interested. But this song gets very noisy, very electronic. It's actually not a song. I think it's one of those tracks that most of the time most people will fast forward through. But in terms of the flow of the record and the concept end to end, I think it's important. And it kind of actually, in a way, really tells you what the ocean that I'm talking about is. This song, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. This song, Where Is Everybody, is also pretty accessible. What's interesting about this song is that it's not only 100% pre-written, but considered 100% pre-recorded. I recorded this song months ago when I was just kind of noodling around on my guitar in my hotel room. I just recorded it as a voice memo on my phone. And when I decided to put it on the record, I listened to that memo, and I think I made one minor edit just to tighten it up a little bit, and then I just recorded layers on top of it, and I actually kept the original recording end to end, which is why I counted it as 100% recorded. This is kind of folky also, and I think it's actually pretty accessible, you know, pretty cool song on the record. So I kind of skipped that one earlier, forgot about it. Manual Dry Standpipe is entirely made of samples that I recorded commuting to New York City on the train. So it is entirely electronic, sample-based. To me, it's sort of an experiment in what music you can create if you're just given sort of a pile of sound, of particularly non-musical by most people's standards sound to work with, and then kind of slicing and dicing and looping and things like that to try to create something that sounds kind of musical. So that's really sort of an interesting and fun piece. Again, one that many people will probably fast forward through most of the time. And I think the last piece I haven't talked about yet is this song called Listen. Listen is really the turning point of the record. It's almost a spoken word piece. I actually originally envisioned it as a spoken word piece, but I did end up singing it. It uses a drone sound that actually is introduced here and used again here in these opening and closing instrumentals. And then I sing the lyrics over that drone. I originally thought I would just speak them, but once I heard the drone, I actually decided to play with actually delivering it with some tonality to it, and it came out kind of nice. So I kind of worked with it. Also, a very pretty long song, but this is really the turning point on the journey, so to speak. So it's kind of an important song from the concept standpoint of the record, although musically, again, maybe not a tune that most people are going to think of as, you know, something to rock out to, or or even accessible in too many ways. So that's basically the layout of the record. As I mentioned, I was pretty happy with how it came together content-wise, production-wise. Again, lots of sacrifices had to be made because of the time frame of this project, but that's pretty much how it fits together, and I was really happy with how the combination of genres really conveyed that vision of the concept that I wanted to get across. So thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you again next week. Hey folks, this week, since the video was so late and since that front end video was kind of long, I think I would just go super cheap and super fast with a music link for you. This was sent to me earlier this week by a good friend. It is a cover of a song by my favorite band, done by a band I've never heard of, which happens to be a death metal band from Finland. So enjoy. See you next week.